While most e-commerce brands struggle with rising ad costs and decreasing conversion rates, one of our clients managed to systematically improve their customer journey through strategic experimentation. And no, this wasn't a massive corporation with unlimited budget for ads. No, in fact, this was Ahead Nutrition, a better-for-you snack company that understood one crucial thing, that in today's market, you need to maximize the value of every single visitor. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly how we helped Ahead Nutrition build and implement a successful experimentation program step by step and data point by data point. And just to be clear, this isn't theory. This is a real case study with real results. So if you're ready to see what's possible when you implement experimentation the right way, then let's dive in. All right, so let's look at where we started out with Ahead Nutrition in this case study. Their initial situation was like the following. They basically were facing rising ad costs, like literally every e-commerce brand. And they kind of realized and knew they had to maximize the value they were getting from existing traffic. So it was no option to just keep increasing ad spend, but they had to actually convert of more of the traffic that was already there. And they also understood one thing very clearly. It's not just like they couldn't go and continue going with the let's give it a go approach in just trying to implement some best practices they saw maybe on, or somebody saw on LinkedIn. That approach just wasn't cutting it anymore. What they needed, in fact, was a structured approach to optimization, and one that was data-driven. And the challenge here really was that a systematic approach to experimentation was required. And not that generally that's like a challenge, but it's just we were starting at zero there. They hadn't run a single experiment prior to working with us. So that also meant there was no testing setup. And we needed to set up proper testing processes from scratch, including the entire technical setup. And we also needed to validate all changes with hard data. So it wasn't like we'll do some A/B tests for this and other things we'll just implement. No, we had to ideally test everything. And yeah, that's quite a challenge if you start in an environment where there was no testing, at least on page before. What we wanted to build also was an internal competency for long-term success. And I'll show you at the end also what that turned into. Our approach, as always, and you've probably seen this if you follow me for a while, we typically start with a structured assessment of the current setup. This means we're trying to understand where are the customers when they're coming to the site. What's their idea of Ahead Nutrition? What was their, like, what kind of problems were they facing, right? We were looking at data, like just on-page data back in the day, this good old times, Universal Analytics, later moved to GA4, but also heat map data, like trying to understand where people actually clicking, desktop versus mobile. They also had like a different site, like a different page layout than they do today. We were looking at qualitative feedback and review analysis, right? So we were looking into reviews they had on Amazon already, right? Versus reviews they had on the site. We were looking into feedback we got from customer support, and there's like a huge amount of data you can look at there. Then we were obviously also doing an expert review, just actually right in the beginning when we started, we also did like an expert review going through each page, trying to understand how does the site work and like where are things that we can improve. We did that also using a methodology we call a deconstruction. So we really went pixel by pixel more or less through the site and understood like, okay, from our experience, what are the things that we believe would work well here or things that are not working well, and use that as also an initial guide before there was more data available for ideas and first experiments. Then obviously also session recordings, because like it's one thing to go through the site ourselves, but it's another thing to see actual users and customers go through the site, purchase things, also just explore what the different product options are and see where they're struggling, right? Then we also did something we call a copy teardown, which is basically going through the copy on the page and like inspecting it and looking at, okay, what kind of customer problems are we tackling there? Like what fears are we going into, etc. Then also one of the things that's maybe not always necessary, but in this case made sense, is doing a competitor analysis. So looking at what other brands are out there that doing a similar thing or that are attractive to a similar audience, and like what kind of messaging are they using, right? What kind of products do they have on the market? And because at the time, Head Nutrition had like a mix in their product portfolio, which was like these good for you snacks, but then they also had what I'd call at the moment probably legacy products. I don't think they carry them anymore, but which was some pills and other supplements they were selling. So we had to understand like how does all of that fit into their current offering and also the direction they were going. Today, this is what we typically do, and it's a bit more structured now in our friction audit. I'll give you a quick look. So basically, our friction audit has like a find, focus, fix framework. You can look into more of that in the link here, just if you're curious of how that works or how you potentially can do something like that yourself. Continuing with our approach, we then implemented an updated tracking. They already had like a very solid tracking framework, in fact, but we also needed to make sure that we can hook into that with the A/B testing tooling. And then also we just used our hypothesis-driven testing methodology that you can find out more in the full e-commerce CRO course that I recorded recently, and that has attracted quite a few people to watch it and actually implement the methodologies that I'm teaching there. Then key metrics we focus on, obviously we started out with conversion rate, and then slowly but surely also tried to take a look at, okay, how do our changes impact average order value, and not the least like revenue per user, which is basically those two multiplied. And then also like on a test by test basis, we were looking at other behavior metrics, specifically also regarding test outcomes. Some were like add to cart, some were also just like how are people leveraging some of the features, for example, filters, etc. But yeah, that would go probably a bit too deep into the nitty gritty of very individual tests, or specific tests rather. Implementation process, so we needed to establish a clear testing protocol. And this is not the testing protocol specifically that we used at the time. This is the more refined version that we recommend or use today with clients and adapt in where needed. But basically having this rhythm of doing research, creating ideas from this research, like leveraging insights, prioritizing these ideas, adding hypothesis, potentially going through the whole implementation and execution process of testing and monitoring and doing all that stuff, to analyzing experiments, coming out with learnings and turning them again into insights, but also making decisions is probably the most important factor of it all, like making decisions, but based on data and not just pure opinion. Then we also built a more systematic approach to gathering user data, specifically how we do research. This is something that we developed also throughout this and other client projects, which was really helpful in the projects after and like even in the project itself. Then we also created a structured testing roadmap, and sometimes people are like, yeah, but you can just go ahead and test. Yeah, but something we recommend always is like at least for the next few weeks or sometimes even 1 or 2 months, like planning out the tests you're going to do. One, you actually know what direction you're going into, but also, and you have an idea and you can present this to other stakeholders. But one of the other things that helps you to do is you can already plan resources and allocate resources, especially if you look into like all the steps that are required or at least suggested, like design, development, quality assurance, but even things like legal approval. Sometimes things take time. With Head Nutrition, this was not the case. We were really lean. We had a really lean process, but sometimes you just need to make sure resources are properly allocated. This is why we created a structured testing roadmap that gave us the security and safety to know exactly what we're doing, but also give the client better understanding of where we're headed, what's actually happening, right? And this already also helped in communicating the plan to the client visually, which is always a good thing. Then initially we worked with Google Optimize because we had somewhat of a tight budget, but soon definitely had to switch to a tool we later learned to love, a professional tool, A/B Lift, which is budget friendly, but still has all the required tech inside that you need for a professional A/B testing program. And it also, like, the main thing for us was we needed a tool that was able to integrate with a somewhat custom server-side tracking solution. It was just not possible at the time with Google Optimize. And as we later learned, Google Optimize sunset, so it was the right step anyway, going with a proper testing solution. Then also with tracking specifically, we always, and also in this case, are doing a complete overview of all the event tracking, and so we actually know what are we tracking for experiments, what are we tracking for other purposes or just for discovery. And we had like this sheet, now looks a little bit different, but we had this sheet that we tracked all the events and clicks and things that were happening on page. Right, so this is the things that we were doing. Now, I earlier mentioned that at the end or towards the end of our collaboration with Head Nutrition, they were deciding to just to also better use the resources they already have to move testing in-house. And this gave us the opportunity to move from an end-to-end partner where we executed everything end-to-end, like from ideas to ideation, from research to ideation to execution and analysis of tests, to move towards more of a trusted advisor and sparrings partner with Head Nutrition. And this led us to helping the people we had already worked with in implementing and creating the tests, to them taking over the whole process and start building experiments by themselves, which I believe was fairly smooth. By the way, I also created somewhat like guide. I think there's also going to be a YouTube video coming out, but for now there's the LinkedIn post, 5 levels of in-house experimentation. If you're curious of what in-housing experimentation can look like, then just check it out here. There's basically 5 levels and or modes that you can look at. Then key results. Obviously, this is probably what most you guys are interested in, like what is it that we achieved at the end of the day, right? There is, it's a bit hard to sometimes like just give a cumulative overview. This is how much we increased conversion rate, etc., because there's multiple factors. So let's look at the key results that we achieved with Head Nutrition. And probably this is like what most of you guys were looking forward to. Throughout the 18 months, approximately 18 months that we were working together, we achieved at the end of the day a win rate, like looking over all the experiments that we ran, of about 35.4%, which is fairly high. And if I was to guess, this would decline over time. But it shows that we've uncovered and exploited many opportunities using our proven research and testing framework. One thing that I always like to point out, which I believe is good to know, is that we typically see win rates between 17 and 28%. And while win rates is not the most important metric in an experimentation program, it's one that is often used by people to judge whether or not an experimentation program is good. The reason why I do not recommend that necessarily is because, especially in the beginning of an experimentation program, I mean, I believe in this case, with 18 months in, obviously this is a while ago, but this is still fairly in the beginnings. Win rates tend to be higher because there is more untouched stones and hence more opportunity to optimize what is already there, right? But anyway, I wanted to point out, like with the win rate of about 35.4%, this is quite high, and we were really happy and, to be honest, also a bit proud to have had these numbers at the end of the day. But what I also want to go into, and what a lot of people are interested in, like what were the actual per test impact that you were seeing. And I just want to give a few examples, because obviously I can't go into all of the tests that we were running with Head Nutrition at the time. I just want to give a few examples, and because I can't obviously go into all experiments we were running with Head Nutrition at the time. But one that, for example, stood out and also represents a real business case is that in the beginning, their AOVs were too low to cover the costs to acquire customers. So basically, their orders were not profitable on the first order, meaning they sometimes only went into profitability on the second or third order, depending on the order value of that time, right? So what we decided to do is we decided to test shipping thresholds, and this ended up increasing revenue per visitor and also AOV, but I don't have the exact number handy right now, by 4.7%, statistically significant, right? And this was really cool because we were able to, with a fairly simple test, I think at the time we used Intelligence as a tool to do that, we were able to simply increase the shipping threshold by, I think it was from 29 to 39, but I would have to look it up again. And that was a fairly simple test, was fairly simple to also then implement. So there were no costs to just implementing that change. And that was really great. Then also the brand, I think about a year in working with us, they went into a big rebrand. I earlier mentioned they had this split up product portfolio between like supplements and these better for you snacks, right, that they're still carrying today. And they just went into through a rebrand. You even see their old logo in these screenshots. So what we did leading up to that rebrand, and with that also a redesign of most of the page, especially in terms of imagery and stuff like that, but also in terms of some layout changes, we decided to test, because we saw that in one of the suggestions for the new page, we saw a 2-column layout and more highlighted buttons for these product cards. And what we decided to do is like, hey, if they're gonna implement it anyway, we better just test it and actually make sure this is adding to the bottom line, or at least to the top line in this case here. And we ended up with a conversion rate increase of 6.68% and an average revenue per user of 7.27%. So while this is not something that came from an insight that we had as a consultancy here, this helped us really understand how important it is to understand discovery throughout the customer's journey, right? Especially with a growing product portfolio, which later on they now have quite a lot of products. So I'm assuming also product discovery is still a big thing, and I'm glad we were already able to discover it at that point. So I'm just gonna make this italic here. And in an effort to increase average revenue per user then even more, and also understand relevancy of climate neutral shipping methods. And again, there was like a lot more tests that we ran, but just highlighting a few, we tested highlighting them in the card, like specifically talking about the climate neutral shipping methods. And you see this is already in the new layout here. Once highlighting them once the visitor reached the threshold being like to get free shipping. And this led to an increase, and this was actually somewhat unexpected to see big numbers like that in this case, but this led to an increase of 8.47% in conversion rate, and also an increase of 12.17% in average revenue per user. And now for those who are interested, you can just calculate what the AOV increase was, since conversion rate and AOV, times AOV equals our ARPU. So one important thing, I think I'll just put an end to more examples here, but is that it is not just about the individual impact of these tests, right? Because what we really care about is the learnings from these tests. And sometimes tests don't work, and that's fine. And with not working, that means specifically that there is no positive effect of the test, or sometimes there's just no effect at all. But what we really care about is the learnings, and sometimes even just skipping a test, not implementing a change, and then using learnings and even this momentum that we're gaining from not implementing things that don't work for the long-term impact, and leveraging that to gain momentum and grow. So speaking about long-term impact, we helped the team run tests independently of us, now with, I believe, some outside help. They have it more and more, even outside of the e-com team, developed a data-driven culture, and they are continuously optimizing customer journey, which we believe to be a sustainable approach to growth. And as we've seen, they've grown quite significantly. If you want to look into the actual case study on page, which we created, then you can look at it here. There's also some comments that the founder gave us or made about us, and there is also a video that you can look, where he gave us a full-fledged a few minute testimonial, which I was really happy to see. So that's exactly how we helped Head Nutrition establish a successful experimentation program that to this day continues to help them grow their business. But you really have two options here. A, you can try to implement everything by yourself, figure out the right testing tools, build your processes from scratch, train your team while running day-to-day operations, deal with all the technical setup and maintenance, and risk making expensive mistakes along the way. Or you can get help from someone who's done this many, many times and guide you through proven systems that work. If you're not already running a structured experimentation program that consistently improves your metrics, you definitely need some help. And luckily for you, this is exactly what we do here at 3Tech. We've helped companies like Ahead Nutrition build their experimentation program from scratch, PKW.de improve their customer journey systematically, and Rosenthal scale their testing efforts. Click the first link in the video description down below and book a strategy session with me. On this call, we'll analyze your current setup and show you exactly how you can build a high-performing experimentation program just like we did for Ahead. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content on experimentation and CRO, and see you in the next video.